what is the comprehensive plan, what's the planning process, what are the elements of the comprehensive plan, so that was put first. Then we discussed, there I'm showing how we moved that up and around. And then we discussed the planning area. Now, the planning area was briefly discussed in the 2012 plan, but we thought it would be worthwhile to enhance that discussion. There's a map that was in the 2012 plan, but then we put an extract of the Illinois state statute regarding plan commissions and the planning area. And the planning area is essentially 1.5 miles beyond our corporate limits. Because that gets mentioned quite a bit in the plan. We're talking about our planning area, so we felt that was worthwhile to make that a little stronger. And then we come down, then we answer the question after we establish what's a comprehensive plan, what are the elements of the plan, and what is our planning area. Then we answer that question on why does Hampton Hills need a comprehensive plan. And part of that answer has to do with our planning area, so that's why that was put up first. Yeah, I kind of covered that. And then this public participation and community outreach, that we just moved to an appendix. We felt that was again the 2012 process, and that was all put in an appendix. All right, and again, just to emphasize, a lot of this was rewritten. The intent, I believe, is still the same, it's still valid. The 2012 plan I thought was pretty good, but when you start to reorganize this, you're taking things within paragraphs, within sections, and moving them around. So it's hard to read and compare sentence by sentence or paragraph by paragraph, but I think the overall intent and meaning of this chapter and the other chapters are still the same. Chapter 2, called Regional and Local Context. This starts off with the history of Hampton Hills, and I will say, one of my kind of complaints of planners and the way that we, me a planner, do comprehensive plans, and I've worked on comprehensive plans before, and I've been to American Planning Association conferences, and I'm often like the guy screaming, "The emperor has no clothes," to my colleagues. And one of the things I really just don't like about the way this is done is they all have this history of the community. It starts off with Joe so-and-so built a log cabin along this creek, and then the railway came through, and then there's not a word what happened in the intervening 140 years, right? And ours wasn't perhaps that bad. I'm being a bit facetious here, but I did want to take our history, and we're not writing a history of Hampton Hills, but I did want to lay a little bit more of the foundation and background, and did want to include what had happened, particularly over the last couple of decades, because I think that informs what goes into the plan and helps guide us. So we did enhance the history. There's a bigger discussion of the railways coming. There was actually some errors in the 2012 plan. On that, we talk more about transportation. Here's a couple old road maps from Illinois. I think the bottom of this road map, I'm not sure about the top, but it just shows kind of the growth and transportation of the area as a whole, because this chapter is discussing our history and place within the region. Just a few interesting air photos. These were included on a spread in the plan from 1939. This is the area where we're sitting now. Wasco area, and here's what it looks like today. So this leads into what has transpired over the last 20, 30, 40 years, this growth and credit growth that has hit this region. And then the rest of that, as we through the history of Hampton Hills, it kind of is the same. We kept the Declaration of Incorporation, I wanted to say independence there. We kept that the same, and then we also kept the mission statement and vision statements. I don't think we really did too much with those. So those remain the same, and the 2012 plan had these in nice boxes, so we wanted to keep that kind of format and highlight that. We came up with the Declaration. I was trying to mimic, something John Hancock would have written, and then on the right we had this 2-page spread. Okay, and then there was a discussion on the title of the section, Image and Culture, and commissioners decided that community essence would be a better description of what we were talking about there. And then we got into the demographics and employment, some minor moving around, but again, kind of the same content, just updated demographic information. I prefer a mouse instead of this pad. So, I do want to comment on this because this was one of the things many of the commissioners brought up was the 2012 plan included relatively lengthy discussion on the relationship of the comp plan to CMAP's 2040 plan. And there's now a CMAP 2050 plan. The feeling was that we're on the fringe of the CMAP area, and a lot of the 2050 plan is talking about issues that really are not terribly relevant to us. So this discussion of relationship to a CMAP plan was deleted. And CMAP that worked on our plan in 2012 obviously had that in. So that's been removed, that discussion. All right. Just showing the updated graphics. CMAP does do a very nice called community snapshot, and a lot of the statistics and demographics came from that document. They update that about every 2 years ago. And of course, you can't see this. I think it's kind of interesting to look at. It shows the growth of some communities nearby, and Campton Hills since 2007 has remained pretty stable. We actually declined from 2010 to 2020 Central slightly, but tremendous growth in virtually every community around it. Some of that's through annexations, but most of it's through building activity. South Elgin, Gilbert's tremendous growth. And again, this informs what we're getting into later in the plan. Okay. Vision 3, that was called the old plan, as I mentioned, principles, policies, and strategy. And we came up with vision, goals, and strategies. Right? When we get to that, again, the basic outline remained the same. We put it in a chapter overview, but then Section A all the way down to Section H remained the same there, with the exception of E. So that's called mixed-use centers. Now it's called commercial and mixed-use centers. There's really not a huge discussion of commercial, either present commercial or potential commercial in the future. We have commercial in Wasco. We actually have a little bit of mixed use. And then commercial right around Village Hall here. Potential for other commercial if we do an annexation south of town or perhaps elsewhere. So we did discuss that. And there was a public comment earlier this evening on a plan that was in Chapter 3 for a town center. And that was debated over several meetings by the commission. There were 2 commissioners that adamantly wanted references to that plan removed in the plan itself, that little diagram in there removed, and then there were 2 commissioners that adamantly wanted it retained. So we kept it in with full knowledge that it could be removed at the village board level. And the reasoning for that decision was that example is nothing more than an example. It's not advocating that particular design at that particular location. And that's stated in the text, and it's stated in the caption. Actually, when I reread it, I could actually enhance the language that it's not at that particular location. But that was the idea, that this might maybe a general guideline for something that we want to do in the future. There was a lot of effort spent on that 2012 plan, so the retention of that, those advocating that, put one out, and it's in there. And then you see Section I is called Managed Change. That was that very, very lengthy section within this chapter that now form the basis for Chapter 4. So Chapter 4 is land use, and then J, community health. Really, when we started looking at this, the things that was a brief section, and those types of things about, exercising, bike paths, and water resources, water quality, those were kind of covered almost in every other section here. So We felt when we got to that, it's kind of redundant, so that was dropped, because most of those comments or suggestions, goals, strategies were really incorporated elsewhere. So that fell away. So on to, there we go, on to chapter 3, a little more discussion. Ubo on me. We kicked the terms around quite a bit. I changed it every place but here on the title page. That should say vision, goals, and strategies. I caught that as I was doing this presentation, so that's an easy fix. But we can go back to principles if you want. And then I think this was Teresa's idea that we lay out a vision statement for each of those sections in chapter 3. Community character, water resources, transportation, and we put that in one box. Turned out to be on one 2-page spread. So now we can see, what's the vision for Campton Hills, all right, and within each of these elements. So, most comprehensive plans have this 3-tier hierarchy, and they use different phrases, but really they start with a principle or vision, and then they'll have something like, okay, how do we want to attain that vision? And that becomes then kind of a 2-tier effort or articulation. We had, in the 2012, we had like a broad principle, and then we had principles for each of these subsections, for community character or homes and neighborhoods, and then we had the policies covering that principle, and then we came down to what was called strategies on how we were going to actually implement those policies. We kicked around a few ideas. I brought in some examples from other comprehensive plans, and we decided on this, which I think is more common, at least in the Chicago metro region. Again, vision or principles, and then what are the goals that are going to help you achieve that vision. And I'll say here, our vision, the time horizon of the plan, is out to 2045. Most comprehensive plans have a time horizon, and then so we're looking at the vision out to 2045, and then what are the goals within that vision, and then specifically, how are we going to accomplish those goals. So whether we call them principles, policies, or strategies, or visions, goals, or strategies, it's all kind of the same, all right? And I think I have one example here. So this was from the 2012, the overall policy, I think they called it. The natural assets, cultural heritage, and historic character of Campton Hills should be maintained and enhanced to preserve a rich sense of place. All right. Reworded, again, I think we're kind of saying the same thing, is that we essentially don't want to change a lot. The character of the community as we know it today will not change drastically through the time horizon of this plan, that is 2045, and in decades to come, the Campton Hills planning area, the emphasis on the planning area, again, will look much as it does now. Right? That was just one I pulled out. And then from that overall vision statement, we get various goals, and then it comes down to the strategies for the goals. All right? And then we go into land use. Land use is really the heart, the essence of virtually any comprehensive plan. So that's why we pulled it out of Chapter 3 under that Manage Change section, and it was elevated, I think, where it belongs, to its own chapter. And this was reorganized, I think, into a more logical fashion, or something I think is more typical of comprehensive plans. So you start off just discussing what are your existing land uses right now. How much agricultural land do we have? How much commercial land do we have? And there's a map that shows that. You might have a few statistics in there. And then there is normally a future land use map, and that kind of shows what we anticipate or what we want to become in the future. So if you were an aggressive community, you would say, oh, we want this to be a big commercial strip. We want all this area to be high-density retail, and so on and so forth. So our map actually doesn't change too much because we don't really, we were created in a lot of ways to resist change or to manage change better than perhaps some other communities do. So our future land use map and our existing land use map are not terribly different. And then after a discussion of that, we got into the goals for land use, again, kind of mimicking what was in all those sections in Chapter 3, and then the strategies for land use. Okay? So there is this term conservation design thrown around quite a bit, and that's defined here. There's a kind of a box or page that talks about that, and then you'll see the one kind of big difference on our future land use map is down in the southern portion of our planning area, which we have not annexed in most of that. And you'll see that this blue, and that's for conservation design. But if you look at the rest of those two maps, it's essentially remaining the same. And I will note that Jerry Johnson gave me some corrections on the open space today, so Scott has left. I'll forward those to Scott. So these maps will be updated slightly. There's some open space that's not included on there. But you take a look at that, there's not a lot of drastic changes. I mean, we discussed Route 47. The idea was from the commission that we did not want to see this turn into some big, strip mall row. We wanted to keep a lot of the agriculture, say in the northwest or other portions of town, the same. It's not to say we aren't going to entertain ideas here and there of a lot subdivision or maybe some smaller developments coming in, but by and large, the community, our vision is 2025 to 2045 is not going to change drastically, with the exception perhaps of the annexation or planning and development down in the area that is not within our corporate boundaries at the moment. Okay? So that's my presentation, and I went through that very fast. I know it's been a long evening, and I can certainly entertain any questions. I have a printed document of this. I can, hopefully find, if you have any questions, I can find what I'm looking for quickly. I can discuss some of the broader policy things or this map or anything else.
And we can provide, I gave Nick a hard copy because he asked for it, but I can provide everyone a hard copy because it printed out, I think you get a different feel for it. And sometimes it loads slow and you don't think the map is there, but if you wait long enough and refresh, it is there. And
yeah, and I will say, so when I export this from the software, I do it in two fashions. One is a one-page spread, which is better for printing, and then there's a two-page spread, which I like to see. I use a desktop, so it lays out really nicely. You've got the same orientation on a desktop. Not so well, perhaps, for a laptop, but it lays out very nicely. And then you see the nice, how it spreads across the pictures. There's really, I think, effort made to make this visually attractive and have these very nice photos, a lot of them taken by Peggy Sue Seehafer. So I think it just enhances the look. So I kind of like the two-page spread. I think online we had the two-page spread, but we can change that and make both available. All right.
And certainly any written commentary that any of you have, it'd be good to get it to Jim and I, and for our next meeting, we will distribute that through Tracy to everybody. So it helps you in your review in the next discussion. We didn't figure there'd be a great deal of debate tonight because you want to digest it, look at a document, maybe have a hard copy that you can write in, and then we can let the public have seen it for a month online before you really start thinking about taking action.
Go ahead.
Quick question.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning for the town center, the for and against, if you could just give us some brief?
The two that were against this thought it would encourage developers who are looking for sites. They would say, aha, look at this. They are advocating densities. They're advocating this specific design at this specific place, and then we would have to beat them off and potentially face legal challenges because it wasn't our comp plan. That was the side that was against. And the side that was for felt it had been a worthwhile endeavor when we did that back in 2012. And the general concept of having a mixed-use center, not necessarily there, but elsewhere in town, maybe down by La Fox or someplace, had merit, and therefore it should be included. And they wanted the caveat expressed in there that this is not advocating any specific design. And I should go back, as I mentioned
Or
before,
specific
location, and that I think